What happened to gas station attendants? They disappeared because self-service became legal and profitable. In 1973, when oil prices spiked and margins collapsed, gas stations could no longer afford the labor. States that had banned self-service pumping began reversing those laws to help stations survive. Within a decade, full-service pumping went from standard to rare, and by the 1990s, it was effectively extinct. Today, New Jersey is the only state that still requires attendants to pump your gas. You pulled up to the pump and waited. You didn't get out of the car. A young man in a uniform, often with the station's name stitched across the pocket, walked over, leaned down to your window, and asked how much you wanted. You'd say, "Fill it up," or $5 worth, and he'd get to work. While the gas pumped, he didn't stand there. He lifted your hood without asking, pulled the dipstick, checked your oil. He walked around to the windshield with a squeegee and a bucket, wiped it down in long strokes, sometimes the back window too. He crouched by your tires, eyeing the tread, checking the pressure if something looked off. If you were a regular, he knew your car. He knew you put a quart of oil in every few weeks, or that your passenger side tire ran low. When the pump clicked off, he'd top it off manually. No automatic shutoff you could trust back then. He'd come back to your window, tell you the total, and you'd hand him cash or a card. If it was a card, he'd take it inside, run it through one of those manual imprinters, the kind that made that heavy chunk sound, and bring back the slip for you to sign. You didn't leave the car for any of it. The stations themselves were smaller operations. Most were independently owned or franchised under a brand like Texaco, Gulf, or Sinclair. The attendant wasn't just there to pump gas. He was often a teenager working after school, a young man saving for something, sometimes the owner's son. It was entry-level work, but it was real work. You learned how to talk to people, how to handle money, how to spot a problem with a car before the customer even mentioned it. There was a rhythm to it. The bell. You probably still remember that. The pneumatic hose stretched across the station entrance, and when your tires rolled over it, a bell rang inside. That's how the attendant knew someone had pulled in. It wasn't a sensor or a camera. It was a rubber hose and a little chime, and it worked. The end of this system didn't happen all at once, but it had a clear starting point. In 1973, OPEC imposed an oil embargo in response to U.S. support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Oil prices quadrupled. Gas stations that had been selling fuel for 30 or 40 cents a gallon were suddenly paying more for supply than they could charge at the pump under price controls. Profit margins on gasoline collapsed to nearly nothing. At the same time, labor costs were rising. The minimum wage had increased throughout the late 1960s and the early 1970s. Stations that employed 2 or 3 attendants per shift found themselves losing money on every gallon sold once you factored in wages. The math stopped working. Self-service had technically existed in some states for years. It wasn't a new technology, but most states had outlawed it. The justification was safety. Untrained customers might cause spills, fires, or accidents. In reality, gas station owners and labor unions supported the bans because they protected jobs and kept competition predictable. But when the crisis hit, those laws became unsustainable. States began reversing their self-service bans throughout the mid-1970s. Virginia lifted its ban in 1974. Michigan followed in 1975. Others came after. By 1975, self-service islands were appearing at stations across the country, often right next to the full-service bays. The price difference was immediate and obvious, 5 or 10 cents less per gallon if you pumped it yourself. For a household filling up twice a week, that added up. Customers shifted fast. Even people who'd never pumped their own gas before figured it out in 1 or 2 tries. The nozzle had a trigger, the pump had instructions, and the automatic shutoff kept you from overfilling. It wasn't complicated, and once you'd done it yourself a few times, Paying extra for someone else to do it felt unnecessary. Stations responded by cutting staff. The attendant who used to work the pumps moved inside to run the register, or the job disappeared entirely. By the early 1980s, most stations had converted fully to self-service, keeping maybe one full-service island for customers who were willing to pay the premium, usually older drivers or people in a hurry who wanted the oil checked while they waited. But even that didn't last. Full-service islands required dedicated staff, and if only 10 or 15% of customers used them, the labor cost didn't justify keeping someone outside. Stations began closing those bays. The pump stayed, but the service didn't. By the 1990s, you'd be hard-pressed to find a station anywhere that still had someone else pump your gas. New Jersey is the only state that kept its ban on self-service, which is why attendants still exist there today. The state has cited safety and job preservation as justifications. New Jersey remains the last place in the country where you still pull up, roll down your window, and wait for someone to fill your tank. Oregon kept its ban until 2023, when it finally allowed self-service, leaving New Jersey as the sole holdout. What disappeared wasn't just a job, it was a type of interaction. The attendant wasn't a clerk behind plexiglass or a voice through a drive-through speaker. He was outside next to your car, close enough to notice things. If your exhaust smelled wrong, he'd mention it. If your belts looked cracked, he'd let you know. It wasn't upselling in the modern sense. It was part of the job, and it came from proximity. That relationship had value, especially for people who didn't know much about cars. A housewife driving her husband's sedan during the week, an elderly man who'd never opened his own hood. They trusted the attendant to catch problems before they became emergencies. When self-service took over, that informal maintenance check disappeared. You were responsible for knowing when your oil was low or your tires needed air, and if you didn't check, nobody else would. The station itself changed too. It went from a service bay with pumps to a convenience store with fuel. The footprint flipped. The garage became smaller or vanished entirely, replaced by aisles of snacks, drinks, and lottery tickets. Revenue shifted from service and repairs to retail. The attendant became a cashier, and the mechanic, if there was one, worked in back on appointments, not walk-ins. Some of this was inevitable. Cars became more reliable. Fuel injection replaced carburetors. Sealed systems reduced the need for constant fluid checks. Oil change intervals stretched from 3,000 miles to 5,000, then 7,500. The assumption that you needed someone to check under your hood every time you filled up stopped being true. But reliability didn't drive the change. Economics did. If margins had stayed healthy and labor had stayed cheap, stations would have kept attendants even as cars improved. What killed the job was the impossibility of paying someone $4 or $5 an hour to provide a service customers could do themselves for free while you were barely breaking even on fuel sales. If you filled up in the late 1970s or early 1980s, you probably saw both systems operating side by side. The self-service island on one side, the full service on the other. You might have used self-service to save money on a weekday fill-up and then pulled into full service on the weekend when you had time to get the car looked at. Eventually, the full-service island sat unused, then got converted, then disappeared. If this brought back something you'd forgotten, go ahead and like the video. It helps more people find these stories. And if you remember what it was like, or how it was different where you lived, leave a comment. I'd like to hear it. Subscribe if you want more of these. We'll keep looking at how ordinary life used to work and why it changed. What we lost wasn't just convenience. It was a kind of accountability. Someone else saw your car regularly. Someone else noticed when something was wrong. That's gone now, and we've adapted. We check our own oil, monitor our own tire pressure, or we don't, and we deal with the consequences when they come. It's more efficient this way, and efficiency was the point. But efficiency doesn't remember the bell, or the uniform, or the young man who wiped your windshield without being asked. You remember it though, and now you know why it ended.